Hi everyone, my name is Iris. I am a freelance journalist and one of the blog editors at YWCA Scotland. Here you can find my social media handles, so if you feel like talking to me, just hit me up on my social media, specifically Twitter and Instagram. Today, I'm hosting a webinar on the relationship between media and gender. I'll be focusing on the misrepresentation of women in the mainstream media, and I'll be looking at the perpetuation of harmful and inaccurate narratives, especially in regards to gender-based violence. I'll also touch briefly on online activism, so that not only will you be able to recognize harmful narratives, but you'll be able to challenge them. Well, let's start from the beginning. What do we mean by media? According to the dictionary, media is the means of communication as radio and television, newspapers, magazines, and the internet that reach or influence people widely. Media affects everything around us, from the billboard you drive next to on your way to work to the headline on the front page of the newspaper on your coffee table. The first thing we need to understand is that media is not neutral. It's not far and detached from our daily lives. Even though we might look at media and journalism in particular as a source of objective analysis able to explain the world to us, we need to remember that it is a reflection of our society, including of those inequalities that women are regularly subjected to. In fact, information inequality affects women disproportionately. It's part of the gender gap. Women and girls are often ignored or invisible in the media, not only as subjects, but as reporters too. They're underrepresented as experts, as journalists, and as media leaders. Worldwide, they still lag behind men in access to the internet, and when they do engage online, women and girls experience more intense harassment, including sexual harassment. It's so common it's become a meme. So according to Who Makes the News, which is a resource portal on applied media research, 76% of the people in the news, so more than 3 out of 4 people in the news, are male. Who Makes the News publishes a report every 5 years. The next one is due in 2020, so this year, and it's called the Global Media Monitoring Project. This is a worldwide media monitoring, research and advocacy project which is made in collaboration with different groups, such as, for example, grassroots groups, women's rights organizations, media associations, faith-based and interfaith organizations, and university students and researchers from all over the world. In 2015, the Global Media Monitoring Project found that women in the UK made only 31% of reporters and 29% of the subjects reported in the news. And we're talking about the UK, which is supposedly a progressive and inclusive country. This gender gap is widest, unsurprisingly really, in news about politics and government, where women are featured in just 21% of political news. This discrepancy has serious consequences, not only in the newsroom, so not only in the workplace, but in the way news are reported. We can see it in the language, including both words and pictures, the media use to describe women and to describe what happens to them. The language we see in the media often objectifies women and girls, and spreads an imbalanced gender portrayal. And although you might say that not all women working in the media would be gender aware and prone to cover women's needs and perspectives, we are far more likely to have these issues covered if we reach a media landscape that is as equal and as balanced as possible. So in this webinar, we'll see how information inequality has affected the language we use and read in traditional media, meaning that we'll look at newspapers, advertising, and similar without delving into the world of harassment on social media. We'll start from gender stereotypes and the over-sexualization of women, to then move to the language used to talk about gender-based abuse. Starting from gender stereotypes. So we could define gender stereotypes as preconceived views or ideas whereby females and males are arbitrarily assigned characteristics and roles determined and limited by their gender. To break down this definition, in this scenario, the gender spectrum is reduced to a binary, where men and women have to fit predetermined parts. To make it a bit more practical, on one side we have men. Men are expected to be dominating, powerful, dynamic. Think Russell Crowe in The Gladiator. They're supposed to be physically and emotionally strong. Boys don't cry. They must be ready to either save you from a dragon or change a light bulb, because it's all the same. On the other side, we have women. Women are viewed as weak. They're submissive. They're dependent on men. They're an extension of men. Their only life expectation? Marriage and child rearing. Their biggest fear? Gaining weight and spinsterhood. They're vain, they're beautiful, they take hours to get ready, but most of all, they are sexy. Gender stereotypes are deeply rooted in our culture and they're continuously perpetuated by media. A gender stereotype is not harmful in itself, but it becomes harmful when it limits women's and men's capacity to develop their personal abilities, to pursue their professional careers, and to make choices about their lives. Harmful stereotypes don't need to be hostile or negative. They don't need to be things like, oh, women are irrational or hormonal, or they on their period, and things like that. They can be seemingly benign. So, for example, the stereotype of women being nurturing. Actually, the fact that childcare responsibilities often fall exclusively on women is based on this exact stereotype. And we must also say that traditional gender stereotypes are heteronormative, meaning that they take heterosexuality for granted, so they are exclusive, completely exclusive of the whole LGBTQ+ community. So to see how gender stereotypes are perpetuated in the media, we'll take 2 ads as an example. Both these ads were banned for contravening UK gender stereotyping rules. So the first one, which you can see 2 screenshots here, was for Volkswagen's electric e-Golf vehicle, and it was banned in 2018. It was actually one of the first ads to be banned. So the clip showed a series of scenes, including a man and a sleeping woman in a tent, 2 male astronauts, a male para-athlete, and a woman sitting on a bench next to a pram. The main message of the ad was, when we learn to adapt, we can achieve anything. So this sentence takes a completely different meaning, whether you apply it to an astronaut, a para-athlete overcoming all the challenges they have to face to achieve their goals, or when you actually apply it to 2 female characters, one sleeping and the other one contemplating life on a bench. So basically some kind of Forrest Gump without the running and the action. The second ad is quite recent. It was run last year on the London Underground by People Per Hour, which is an online platform that connects businesses and freelancers. It says, you do the girl boss thing, we'll do the CEO thing. Quite patronizing, isn't it? So basically, this ad implies that women are not skilled at using technology. Fortunately, after receiving quite the complaints, People Per Hour admitted that the advert might come across as sexist and demeaning to women, so they decided to take the word girl from the advert and issue an apology. If you're wondering about what Volkswagen did, they actually said that childcare is an honourable thing, which nobody questioned, and stated that their ad was not sexist. Gender stereotypes are also kept alive by the constant over-sexualization of women. This doesn't happen in advertising only, but it's widely present in mainstream journalism. Even nowadays, female politicians, journalists, and prominent female figures are often judged for their appearance rather than their skills, as we can see from the infamous Daily Mail front page. Never mind Brexit, who won Lexit, just next to a photograph of Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon and then British Prime Minister Theresa May. Inside the paper, actually the show isn't limited to the front page, but it goes on inside the paper where we can read, finest weapons at their command, those spins. And there's also a column that refers to Sturgeon's legs as altogether more flirty, tantalizingly crossed, a direct attempt at seduction. Because, of course, that's exactly what she meant. Ask you, have you ever seen a front page of a national newspaper covering the essential issue of who has better legs between Jeremy Corbyn and Boris Johnson? No? Even in the news, we often see what cinema critics call the male gaze, the act of depicting women and the world from a masculine, heterosexual perspective. This often translates in women being portrayed as sexual objects rather than professionals or just, human. It's demeaning and patronizing, and if this wasn't enough, women are still portrayed as sexual objects in much grimmer situations, meaning in the event of gender-based violence, where we often see victims portrayed as enticing temptresses that somehow were asking for the abuse they received. Before I continue with the next slides, a trigger warning. From now on, I'll be talking about violence against women, especially sexual and domestic abuse. If this might upset or trigger you in any way, I advise you to stop watching now. Violence against women is a violation of human rights, and as stated by the World Health Organization, it's a major public health problem. If we look at the figures, the picture is scary, and when we do, we need to remember that unfortunately, these figures, these statistics, are just the tip of the iceberg, as we know that a large number of sexual offences go unreported. According to the World Health Organization, about 35% of women worldwide have experienced either physical and/or sexual violence in their lifetime. Even worse, most of this violence is committed by someone close to the victim, usually partners or former partners, which is one of the reasons why a lot of cases go unreported. So I'll start talking about violence against women by talking about sexual violence. Looking at the situation in Scotland, we know that 1 in 10 women has experienced rape. In 2018-2019, for instance, 2,293 rapes, 133 attempted rapes, and 13,547 sexual offences were reported to the police. I've shared these statistics with you not only to show you the seriousness of the phenomenon, but to point out how the extent of it makes fair reporting by journalists and media outlets pivotal. Accurate reporting is essential to educate the public, to make women feel safer in reporting, and overall condemn all violence against women. Unfortunately, we still have a long way to go. This is why it's so important for us to look at the way media report on violence against women, from the wording of the headlines to the pictures featured in the articles. To analyse the whole situation, we'll look at every actor in the scene and the act itself. So I start from the victim survivor, as I think we all should do when talking about violence against women. In the media, we see a lot of victim blaming, meaning the victim being blamed directly or indirectly for the abuse they received. Here, I'll show you 2 examples. This is the first one. And in the first case, we see that the victim is indirectly blamed in the headline of Donegal Daily. The headline says, "Donegal student was blind drunk when 2 men had sex with her." So the news outlet thought to break the story by saying that the girl was blind drunk and then she got consequently raped. Although not evident, this correlation suggests that if the woman hadn't been drunk, she wouldn't have been sexually assaulted. In a way, we might infer that she made herself vulnerable to be raped. This choice of words and perspective takes the responsibility away from the rapists and makes the victim accountable for her own rape. The fact that the girl was drunk shouldn't be seen as a lack of responsibility on the victim's part. It should be seen as an aggravating circumstance for the perpetrator, as the girl had no way to defend herself or give consent. Also, this could be an indicator of kind of a predatorial behaviour. Unfortunately, victim blaming is deeply ingrained in our society, and it belongs to what we call rape culture. Rape culture is basically the stereotyped and false beliefs about rape that justify sexual aggression and trivialize the seriousness of sexual violence. Part of rape culture is people asking what was the victim wearing when she was sexually assaulted, whether she was alone, what time of night it was, if she knew the attacker. Rape culture is so ingrained in our society that even today we see European courts come up with appalling rulings. In 2018, an Italian court ruling overturned a rape verdict, in part by arguing that the woman who had been attacked was too ugly to be a credible rape victim. In a way, this is kind of a reverse victim blaming, because she could have never have caused anybody to rape her because she wasn't beautiful enough. And as you see, there's the idea that for someone to rape you, you have to have something that provokes the sexual violence. In this case, it was beauty. By the way, you'll find both cases in the sources I'll provide you with, in case you wanted to read a bit more about them. Blaming victims instead of perpetrators undermines women's credibility and discourages victims from reporting. There is no reason for taking the victim and not the offender accountable. This is gender inequality, plain and simple. Would we have the same approach towards a man who got mugged? Would we be asking if he had short sleeves, which let people see his expensive watch? I don't think so. Another aspect that needs to be addressed is the use of phrases like sex, sexual relationship, and similar to describe what is, in fact, rape. Going back to Donegal Daily, their headline said, as I've already mentioned, Donegal student was blind drunk when 2 men had sex with her. So if the student was blind drunk, there's no way the two guys had sex with her because she couldn't have been able to give her consent. That was rape. And in the event of the intercourse not being confirmed yet, Donegal Daly could have just said alleged rape, but it still has to be framed as a sexual assault. In fact, as clearly explained by Zero Tolerance Scotland in their language guide, which I will link in the sources, using phrases like sex scandal or even just sex, well, it makes it sound a consensual act and it both minimises and sensationalises the crime. Actually, the same effect is achieved by the excessive empathy news reports often show towards the perpetrator. When we describe an alleged or confirmed rapist as a good guy coming from a good family or who always behaved so politely, we are minimizing once again the seriousness of his crime. We're saying, he made a mistake, but... In this way, we're putting the event in a wrong perspective because on one side we generate sympathy for the perpetrator, implying there is a reason for their out-of-character behaviour, and on the other side, we are totally erasing the victim's experiences. Although we shouldn't empathise excessively with the perpetrator, it's also important not to demonise him. If we use terms like monster or beast to describe the attacker, as we can see from these two headlines from the Daily Record, we are dehumanising the offender. Men who rape or kill are ordinary men. By defining them as monsters, we are singling out these cases as exceptional, when instead we should be looking at these events as part of a larger phenomenon, that of violence against women, which, as we can see from statistics, is far too common. So, moving from sexual violence, I will now talk about domestic abuse and femicides. Starting from the very basics, we define domestic abuse as, and I read, a pattern of controlling, coercive, threatening, degrading, and or violent behaviour, including sexual violence by a partner or ex-partner. By femicide, instead, we mean the killing of a woman or girl, usually by a man. I'm talking about these two phenomena together because unfortunately, the only way we hear about many cases of domestic violence is when they end in tragedy. Also, it's important to highlight the connection between the two phenomena, as too often we see the media treat femicides as incidents, as out of character and isolated events of a hurt man. That's why, for example, we read phrases like, killed out of love, jealous boyfriend kills girlfriend, or crime of passion. So according to the 2020 report by Femicide Census, 149 women were killed by 147 men in 2018. This is in the UK. 61% of women, so 91 women, were killed by the current or former male spouse or intimate partner. 12 women were killed by sons or stepsons, and 5 women were killed by a son-in-law or an ex-son-in-law. Therefore, as we saw for sexual violence, women are more likely to be harmed by someone they know. And just in the same way as we saw for the reporting on sexual violence, media outlets often fall into victim blaming when talking about domestic abuse or femicides. They often blame the woman for her own death. So here you have 2 examples of victim blaming in the news media. The first one is from the Daily Record, and you can actually find it also on Strathclyde Digital Course on Gender and Media, which I will link in the sources. The headline says, "Handpicked husband killed wife who called him limp and useless over his erectile dysfunction." The second example is from The Mirror and says, "Husband killed wife on luxury cruise ship because she wouldn't stop laughing at him." Now, although the first headline quotes the killer and the second one quotes some FBI documents, we need to understand that this kind of reporting is harmful and inaccurate. In fact, both headlines suggest that the women were killed for a reason, as they hurt their killer. This way, however, the focus is once again on the perpetrator, and once again we're meant to empathize with him. When we read about femicides, we often know a lot about the man's feelings and his condition. For example, we know about his class, about whether he lost his job, or if he was depressed. When the attacker is not white, media often specify his origin, thus depicting the problem as cultural. We often hear talking about like a clash of cultures instead of acknowledging that the issue is based on gender as part of a gender inequality. It's not only connected to a culture perspective. So in this picture, the victim becomes an accessory. She becomes the cause of that anger which subsequently caused her death. This is not acceptable, as it doesn't do justice to the woman who was killed and it minimizes the event. Also, it doesn't make the man accountable for his actions. In this way, we're still singling out these events as extraordinary, thus forgetting the endemic nature of violence against women, which needs to be pointed out at all times if we want to raise awareness about the phenomenon and put an end to it. So this kind of narrative uses the same perspective, the same point of view of the perpetrator, which we can also see from the choice of pictures. The pictures we see in the media, or that we see in a lot of articles, actually take the perspective, the point of view of the perpetrator, as we see women crouching, trying to protect themselves or showing evident bruises. So once again, we are on the side of the perpetrator. But if we excessively empathize with the offender, if we see only his point of view, women become just figures. They're not human beings anymore. So what can we do to actually do something and change the narrative? So the first thing we can do is speaking up. Be it in the workplace, with your friends, or online, point out any inaccurate or harmful narratives that you see in the media and that regard violence against women. This doesn't mean engaging with trolls or arguing with every single misogynist on Twitter, but it's important that you are vocal with media outlets when you disagree or when you know that their portrayal of women is biased and unbalanced. Secondly, and I cannot stress this enough, believe women. If you read about sexual violence, don't minimize the situation and don't undermine the victim survivor's experience. This can discourage other women to report. Thirdly, spread awareness. So this can be by sharing useful sources or talking with your friends about the problem, or if you have a platform, use your voice to talk about this issue. Lastly, support women's organizations. They do an amazing job in helping vulnerable women and in creating a safe network for women, girls, and gender non-conforming people. You can support them through donations, by following them on social media, by sharing their work, or just volunteering your own time to help out. This is all from me today. If you want to talk to someone about your experience with sexual violence or domestic abuse, you can contact, among others, Scotland's Domestic Abuse and Forced Marriage Helpline. There's Victim Support Scotland, Scottish Women's Aid, and Rape Crisis Scotland. And here you have all the numbers for their helplines. So thank you so much for your time. You'll find the sources I used and I mentioned in this webinar, along with further readings on YWCA Scotland's blog. Again, thank you so much for listening and have a lovely day.